Have you ever wondered what happens when the ferocity of a battlefield warrior meets the strict devotion of an ascetic monk? Or who laid the groundwork for the modern banking system? And why does the world still fear Friday the 13th? At first glance, these questions seem completely unrelated, yet they all trace back to a single, legendary military order, a faction you might recognize from popular films like Kingdom of Heaven. They were the Knights Templar, the sword-wielding, elite holy warriors of the Christian world. To understand their rise, we must look to Jerusalem. Sacred to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, three monotheistic faiths sharing the same divine root, the city has been the epicenter of centuries of bloody conflict. Following the First Crusade, European Christian forces wrested control of the Holy City from the Fatimid Caliphate. The French nobleman Godfrey of Bouillon established the Kingdom of Jerusalem, humbly ruling not as a king, but as princeps, first citizen, or leader. By the early 12th century, Jerusalem had become a magnet for European pilgrims. However, getting there was a deadly gamble. While the sea routes were relatively safe, the overland trek from the coast to the Holy City was plagued by ruthless bandits and enemy combatants seeking vengeance. With the majority of Crusader armies having already returned to Europe, the kingdom was left with a meager defense force of just 300 knights and 300 infantrymen. They desperately needed elite protectors for the vulnerable masses. Enter Hugues de Payens. In 1119, this French knight and 8 of his comrades approached King Baldwin II and the Patriarch of Jerusalem with a radical proposal. They would become the permanent guardians of the pilgrim trails. They swore strict monastic vows of poverty, chastity, and absolute obedience to God. But this raised a massive theological contradiction. How could a man of God, bound strictly by the 10 Commandments and the absolute law, "Thou shalt not kill," also wield a sword to take a life? Hugues de Payens argued a powerful loophole. Striking down an enemy to protect the innocent wasn't murder. It was the righteous eradication of evil. With God's blessing, their violence was an act of divine justice. Moved by their unwavering conviction, King Baldwin II officially recognized the order. He generously granted them a headquarters on the sacred Temple Mount, a site believed to rest squarely on the ruins of King Solomon's ancient temple. From that moment, the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, better known as the Knights Templar, were born, with Hugues serving as their first Grand Master. This location alone cemented their legendary status. According to Jewish tradition, the original temple was built by the famously wise King Solomon between the 10th and 6th centuries BC. Because modern religious sensitivities prevent archaeological excavation on the mount, the site remains shrouded in mystery. Yet, lore dictates that this temple once housed the Ark of the Covenant, the sacred gold-plated chest containing the 10 Commandments handed down to Moses on Mount Sinai. An epic crossing you might recall from the animated classic, The Prince of Egypt. By establishing their base on such mythic ground, the Templars didn't just become a military force. They became the ultimate guardians of Western Christendom's greatest secrets. Naturally, rumors swelled from the ruins of the Temple Mount. Conspiracies claimed the Knights had unearthed the Holy Grail, the legendary cup used by Jesus at the Last Supper, and to catch his blood at the crucifixion, said to grant its wielder infinite power. Some modern storytellers, like Dan Brown in the Da Vinci Code, pushed the envelope further, suggesting the Grail was actually Mary Magdalene, carrying the royal bloodline of Christ. While many believe these mystical discoveries are what secured the Order's immense wealth, history requires no such myths. Let's leave the conspiracies behind. The truth is fascinating enough. Their prestigious headquarters alone acted as a powerful magnet. Backed by the highest authorities of the Church, the Templars became the medieval equivalent of modern superstars. Wealth poured in from across Europe, land, businesses, vast sums of silver, and noblemen offering their sons as new recruits. But their greatest advantage came in the form of a papal bull, Omne Datum Optimum, issued by Pope Innocent II. This decree granted the order absolute immunity from local laws. The Templars could cross any border freely, pay zero taxes, and answer to absolutely no earthly king, only the Pope himself. With a clear mission and overflowing coffers, the Knights Templar exploded into a military superpower. On the battlefield, a Templar was a walking fortress. They fought from horseback, with 90 centimeters arming swords, and were lethal with lances, crossbows, and maces. They wore thick padded gambesons, heavy chainmail, and carried heater shields. Over this armor draped their iconic uniform, a white mantle symbolizing a pure soul, emblazoned with a blood-red cross, representing their readiness for martyrdom. While their arsenal was standard for the era, their logistics were revolutionary. In a time when feudal soldiers had to buy their own weapons, every single Templar was outfitted head to toe with the highest quality gear available, entirely funded by the Order. This incredible uniformity was powered by their financial genius, which we will explore shortly. Armed to the teeth, they served as the vanguard of the Crusader armies, an elite shock cavalry designed to shatter enemy lines. Their tactical supremacy was immortalized on the 25th of November, 1177, at the epic Battle of Montgisard. The legendary Ayyubid Sultan, Saladin, the undisputed champion of the Islamic world, marched a massive army of 26,000 men toward Jerusalem. Confident in his overwhelming numbers, he bypassed the coastal fortresses and carelessly allowed his troops to scatter and pillage the countryside. Waiting for him was King Baldwin IV, a 16-year-old monarch ravaged by leprosy, who had miraculously linked up with the Templar Grand Master, Odo de Saint-Amand. With a combined force of just 4,500 men, the Christians launched a devastating surprise attack. At the tip of the spear were Odo and 80 Templar knights. Chroniclers describe them riding as a single, unstoppable entity, never veering left or right, charging straight into the heart of Saladin's vanguard. Their red cross shields and flashing swords struck like lightning from heaven, crushing the unprepared Muslim center. The shockwave broke the Ayyubid ranks, forcing the great Saladin into a humiliating retreat. Jerusalem was saved, thanks to the brilliant command of the Leper King and the unbreakable resolve of the Templars. Yet, as the 12th century drew to a close, the winds of war shifted. Driven by the shame of Montgisard, Saladin successfully united a fractured Islamic world under his banner. Meanwhile, the Christian coalition began to rot from the inside. Bitter rivalries over tactics, politics, and greed erupted between the Templars and other powerful military orders, like the Knights Hospitaller and the Teutonic Knights, setting the stage for a catastrophic downfall. Decades of internal bickering fatally weakened both the political and military might of the Christian forces. By 1187, a decade after their miraculous victory at Montgisard, the tables had turned. Saladin marched an army of 40,000 men to besiege Tiberias. The kingdom of Jerusalem, still reeling from the death of the Leper King, was deeply fractured. Raymond III of Tripoli and the Knights Hospitaller urged the new monarch, King Guy of Lusignan, to hold a defensive position. Marching into the arid desert against superior numbers was suicide. But blinded by political grudges and swayed by the aggressive Templar Grand Master, Gerard de Ridefort, King Guy ignored the warnings and ordered his army to advance. The result was a slaughter. On the 4th of July, 1187, at the Horns of Hattin, Saladin's forces encircled and annihilated the exhausted, dehydrated, 20,000-strong Crusader army. Jerusalem fell shortly after. Following the battle, while Grand Master Gerard was surprisingly spared, 230 captive Templars were brought forward and beheaded. Yet, even in absolute defeat, the chroniclers noted their terrifying resolve. They refused to break, flee, or renounce their faith, proving to the very end that they were the most fanatical, unyielding warriors of their time. With the holy city lost, the Templars fell back to the coastal stronghold of Acre, holding it for another century before it finally fell in 1291. Pushed relentlessly by the expanding Islamic empires, the order retreated to Cyprus, maintaining a tiny island fortress off the Syrian coast called Arwad. By the early 1300s, they lost Arwad to the Egyptian Mamluks. The Templars had officially lost their last foothold in the Holy Land. Their military crusade was effectively over, and public support began to wane. But while their swords were resting, their economic and political power was just waking up. For 2 centuries, the Templars had been quietly mastering a different kind of warfare: wealth management. Departing crusaders routinely entrusted their vast European estates to the order to manage while they fought overseas. Furthermore, the overland trek to Jerusalem was crawling with highwaymen. Traveling with bags of gold was a death sentence. The Templars offered a genius solution. A pilgrim could deposit their valuables at a local Templar preceptory in Europe. In return, the order assessed the value and issued a coded, encrypted document. Upon arriving safely in the Holy Land, the pilgrim handed over the document and received an equivalent withdrawal in local currency. If this sounds familiar, it should. This was the foundation of modern banking, the historical ancestor of the traveler's check and the letter of credit. This system kept pilgrims safe while flooding the Templar coffers with untaxed capital. Combined with their papal exemption from all local taxes, the poor fellow soldiers of Christ were poor no more. Their famous official seal depicting 2 knights sharing a single horse to symbolize their early poverty had become a glaring irony. Leveraging these massive deposits and land grants, the Templars built a sprawling financial web across the Old World. They owned vast, fertile estates across Europe and the Middle East. They managed farms, built towering cathedrals and impenetrable castles. They engaged in massive manufacturing, import and export operations. They even maintained a private fleet of ships for logistics and trade, and for a brief period, they owned the entire island of Cyprus. Many modern historians consider the Templar group to be history's very first multinational corporation. To keep this river of gold flowing, they provided extensive financial services. This might sound contradictory for a religious order, as the medieval church strictly forbade usury, the practice of charging any interest on loans. But the Templars proved to be financial savants, pioneering clever loopholes. Instead of charging interest, they collected massive management fees, currency exchange rates, or simply claimed all the agricultural profits from the lands that nobles put up as collateral. In reality, the order became the ultimate creditor to the royalty of Europe. Yet, it was exactly this untouchable, immense wealth that planted the seeds for their brutal and catastrophic downfall. Between the 12th and 14th centuries, the political landscape of Europe began to shift. The absolute power of the church was waning as secular nation-states grew stronger. The medieval mindset was flipping. People were increasingly seeing themselves as subjects of their king first and children of God second. This created fierce tension between royal courts and the Vatican, especially when the church commanded a wealthy, elite, and untouchable private army like the Knights Templar. Pope Boniface VIII tried desperately to assert total control over secular rulers, infuriating King Philip IV of France. After years of bitter political and armed conflict, the elderly Boniface died in 1303. Philip seized the opportunity. Refusing to let the church dictate his rule any longer, he orchestrated the election of a puppet pope, Clement V, in 1305. With the pope in his pocket, Philip turned his sights on the Templars. For years, the French crown had relied on the order to manage its national finances, leaving Philip frustrated that he had to essentially beg the Templars for access to his own realm's wealth. Worse, rumors circulated that the Templars were plotting to carve out their own independent state within France, much like the Teutonic Knights in Prussia or the Hospitallers in Rhodes. Most pressingly, King Philip owed the Templars a staggering debt, estimated at tens of millions of livres to fund his wars with England. To Philip, the solution was brutal but simple. Eliminate his creditors, erase his debt, and absorb their vast wealth to achieve absolute monarchy. At dawn on Friday, the 13th of October, 1307, Philip launched a highly coordinated strike, arresting Grand Master Jacques de Molay and Templars across France. The charges were devastating. They were accused of heresy, spitting on the cross during secret initiations, denying Christ, worshiping Satan, and encouraging homosexuality, alongside massive financial corruption. Broken by horrific torture in the dungeons, many knights confessed to the fabricated crimes. Following the French arrests, Pope Clement V issued a decree ordering all Christian monarchs in Europe to arrest the Templars and seize their assets. During the subsequent trials, Many knights, drawing on their sharp legal minds, retracted their forced confessions and fiercely defended their order, but the die was cast. King Philip appointed a loyal archbishop as the chief inquisitor, rendering the Templars' defense utterly useless. In 1312, Pope Clement V officially disbanded the poor fellow soldiers of Christ, handing their remaining assets over to the rival Knights Hospitaller. The final tragedy came 2 years later. On the 18th of March, 1314, Grand Master Jacques de Molay and the order's highest-ranking leaders were led to the pyre. As the flames consumed him, de Molay reportedly screamed a terrifying curse, summoning King Philip and Pope Clement to face the judgment of God within the year. Whether the curse was real or just a chilling coincidence, divine retribution seemed to strike almost immediately. Just a month later, Pope Clement V died. Legend says that as his corpse lay in state on the night of April 20, a fierce thunderstorm rolled in. A lightning bolt struck the church, igniting a fire that burned the Pope's body to ashes. Later that same year, King Philip IV suffered a fatal stroke during a hunting trip. His sons would all die young, plunging the Capetian dynasty into ruin just 14 years later and passing the crown to the House of Valois. The eerie precision of de Molay's dying words, combined with the shock of their initial arrest years prior, cemented Friday the 13th in the Western psyche as a permanently cursed day of catastrophe and bad luck. With the order annihilated in France, surviving Templars across Europe were arrested, put on trial, or absorbed into other military orders. Some quietly faded into civilian life. In places like Spain and Portugal, monarchs refused to persecute them, allowing the knights to continue their work under a new name, the Order of Christ. This iteration survived until it was secularized in 1789, leaving the Templars without a single official descendant today. Yet, the myth of the Knights Templar refuses to die. For centuries, whispers have persisted that the order survived the flames, transforming into a shadowy underground society that continues to protect the secrets of Christendom from the dark. And so, our journey into the world of the Knights Templar comes to an end. What stands out to you the most from their 200-year history? Was it their unshakable faith, their unmatched battlefield courage, their revolutionary financial genius, or their tragic, bloody end?